Hello, everyone. I'm Rachel Paul with IAAP, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items to go over. We do have closed captioning provided. You can select the closed captioning icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And we will also be posting stream text links in the chat if you prefer to view your captions that way. We also have American Sign Language interpretation provided. You can select the interpretation icon at the bottom of your screen to start interpretation. We have microphones muted to prevent any background noise or disruptions, and we will be monitoring the chat for any general questions, dialogue, or issues. And we encourage you to post your questions in the Q&A, and we'll get to those at the end of today's session. So we are very happy today to have Kathleen DeForest with us. So welcome, Kathleen. I'm going to turn it over to you to get us started. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. All right, everyone can see my screen, I hope. There I was, standing in the middle of my gutted bathroom. No cabinets, no toilet, no flooring, no bathtub or shower, no paneling on one wall, completely gutted. And I thought, oh my God, what have I done? And how am I going to put it all back together again? Can anyone relate to this? Have you ever been part of a big overhaul project like a bathroom remodel or kitchen remodel, or maybe a company rebranding? And you start to wonder if the thing is actually going to be completed? The reality is that we can't do the whole project all at once. So, how do you eat an elephant? The answer is one bite at a time. Now, you might be asking, that's great, but how does this relate to accessibility? And that is a fantastic question, and I'm so very glad you're asking it. But before I tell you that story, I want to tell you this story. My name is Kate DeForest. I'm the Web and Digital Content Coordinator for the State University of New York at Oswego. I've worked in web design and digital accessibility since about 2018. And in that time, I have learned that there is a whole lot to learn specifically around accessibility. And it's very easy to become overwhelmed and get frustrated and a little stressed out, right? Because there's a lot to unpack and a lot of things that need to be overhauled. What do we tend to do when we get overwhelmed and stressed out and frustrated? We tend to shut down, right? We start to make excuses. Like, oh, I have too many other projects that need to take priority. I can't do accessibility right now. I just don't understand. There's too much information. I don't know where to start. I can't do it. Hard stop. So today, we're going to talk about how to eat that digital accessibility elephant, and we're going to break down accessibility into smaller pieces. And I would like for you to leave here with a list of ideas and small actions that you can take that you can put into place immediately to help shift the accessibility initiative and culture within your organization. I will also note that I also ask a lot of questions, kind of feedback sort of things. So feel free to either use the reaction icon or throw some answers in the chat. And again, as was mentioned in the beginning, please reserve your actual questions for the Q&A box, and we will get to those. Now, is anyone familiar with the book Atomic Habits by James Clear? This is a phenomenal book. I highly recommend it. It has absolutely nothing to do with digital accessibility. As I was reading this book for the first time a couple years ago, I realized that these principles can be applied to how we approach accessibility. And they can be used to help break it down so it's not quite so overwhelming, right? So we're going to talk through each of these principles and figure out how we can use those to make accessibility a little bit easier. The premise of the book is that small shifts can have a really big impact in any area of our lives. Small shifts are more easily implemented and generally more easily accepted by others rather than the big overhauls, right? The effects of the change may not be immediately noticeable, but they build and compound over time to become significant. Let's say, as an example, that we all together taking a trip. We board a plane in Los Angeles, California, and we're heading east to New York City. If the nose of that plane is shifted 3.5 degrees to the south, we would not end up in New York City. We will end up in Washington, D.C., which is about 228 miles south of New York City. Sitting on the runway, we would most likely not notice that 3.5 degree shift. But that minor adjustment changes the entire trajectory of the plane, and we're going to end up in a completely different spot than what we thought. Another point that's made throughout the book Atomic Habits is that good systems are more important than the actual end goals. Creating good systems help you get to the end goal. Many people will set goals for ourselves, right? We say things like, I want to be healthier, or I want to save more money. We may be saying things like, oh, our organization needs to be more accessible. But we don't always take into consideration the process of how we're going to get to that goal. So saying these things, while those goals are very admirable and very good things to aim for, we need to be very intentional and lay out step by step how we're going to allow ourselves to get to that goal. As accessibility champions and advocates, we may possess some knowledge and expertise and ideas that are different than what other people might know. So we can bring those to the table and make suggestions as to how to lay out that path, how to build that system. So the 4 laws of atomic habits are make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. And by implementing small shifts to incorporate these principles, you are starting to build the system that will support the overall digital accessibility culture. I will also mention that all the quotes that I use come directly from the book and I think are very appropriate for accessibility. So principle number 1, make it obvious. Environment is the invisible hand that shapes human behavior. Think about that for just a minute. Environment is the invisible hand that shapes human behavior. If we want to implement any new habit in our lives, we have to create a supportive environment that will allow us to do that. I heard a story about a visually impaired student who attended my institution a number of years ago. And anytime she wanted to go to the accessibility resources office, she would blow right past the door. She knew what building to go in, what hallway to go down, what side of the hallway, but there was nothing to distinguish that door from any other door. So the staff brainstormed a little bit and they came up with this idea to put the little bumpy, textured anti-slip tape on the floor just outside the door. So as the student was walking down the hallway, her cane or her feet would hit the tape. She could feel the difference, and that made it very obvious that that's where she needed to be. So how do we make accessibility obvious to others? When you're talking about accessibility, first of all, be very direct, clear, and specific. We learned at Oswego that there was a very large disconnect of what the definition of accessibility is, right? I'm going to pick on faculty members a little bit. We would say to faculty members, you have a student who needs an accommodation, your materials have to be more accessible. And they would say, what do you mean? My materials are posted online. They're accessible 24/7. Has anyone else heard that similar line of thinking? So we have to define what we mean by accessibility and then don't just tell people that they need to make their things more accessible, but explain to them why and provide them with resources that help them figure out how. And the best way to do that is to meet people where they are. Include accessibility discussions or trainings in regular department meetings. There's orientations, onboarding, right? You want to sneak it into unexpected places and don't ask people to go out of their way to do things because they either won't do it or they'll do it for a short time, but it won't last very long. So think about other professional development opportunities that are in place within your organizations that you can just kind of throw a little bit of accessibility in there with it and reach a bit of a larger audience. And then model best practices, right? Walk the walk, talk the talk kind of thing. If you want other people to make their materials accessible, you should be providing them with accessible materials as well. So the best way to create a supportive environment, be very direct when you're talking about accessibility. Meet people where they are, bring it into meetings and onboardings that already exist, and then model best practices for the people who are around you. Principle number 2, make it attractive. We can find evidence for whatever mindset we choose. This comes down to shifting the perspective through the words that we use, our attitude, our actions. There's a fantastic example in Atomic Habits about a man who's in a wheelchair. And he's once asked if it's difficult to be confined by his wheelchair. And the man says, I'm not confined by my wheelchair. This wheelchair liberates me. Without this chair, I would be bedbound. My chair allows me to leave the house. That is an extremely powerful mindset, right? Think about the last time someone maybe came up to you and said, Hey, I'm really sorry to bother you, but before they even ask the question, they're already telling you that you're being bothered. So reframe your mindset around accessibility because the wording that we use can create a more positive mindset for others. Now, I don't know if anyone else has come upon this, but people don't like to be told what to do. So when you say to people, you need to make your materials more accessible, they are suddenly on the defensive. And again, picking on faculty members, we would say that to faculty members and they would get very upset with us. So we learned how to flip the script. And instead of saying, you need to do this, we would remind people, you get to create a more positive experience for others by making your materials more accessible. You get to provide your content to a wider audience. You get to allow people to more easily use your content. And that's a big shift in just that little wording. You also want to try to build a network and community of support. As human beings, we strive to be part of something bigger than ourselves. Even the introverts want some sort of camaraderie and community, right? It's why we have things like book clubs, motorcycle gangs, knitting clubs, bowling leagues. You can find a club for everything under the sun because we crave that connection. So let your audience know that they don't have to figure out accessibility by themselves because, again, there's a lot to understand. So connect with other people in your organization who are interested or knowledgeable about accessibility and learn from one another and use each other's knowledge and strength to help really beef up that support network. And focus on the benefits that accessibility has for a very wide audience. Now, this might be redundant to the people who are on this call. Accessibility helps everyone, right? It helps people who experience temporary, situational, permanent disabilities, as well as helping people with no disabilities. And truly, I don't really believe there's anyone that is completely free of some sort of, quote, disability. So every one of us uses an accessibility feature probably every single day. There's kind of the obvious ones, the low-hanging fruit, like automatic grocery store doors, captions, right? Hands-free GPS, voice to text, text to voice, things like Alexa and Siri. All of those technologies and functionalities were created to help people with disabilities, but I would put money on the fact that most of us use at least one of them all the time. And I think that's important to reiterate to people. Accessibility is not just for people with disabilities, it helps everyone. So shifting the perspective, focus on your wording and your attitude, build that network of support, and then focus on the benefits that accessibility can have. Principle number 3, make it easy. If you want to master a habit, the key is to start with repetition, not perfection. How many people on the call are a perfectionist? I am a lifelong card carrying perfectionist, and it bothers me to no end when I have trouble with something. Right? Well, being in accessibility kind of squashed that for me because the truth is, we will never be 100% accessible to 100% of the people 100% of the time. So, striving for perfection became very quickly obvious to me that it was not going to happen. Now, that doesn't mean you can't try to get better, right? You can focus on the small 1% shifts and focus on one step at a time in order to try to keep pushing that needle forward. How many people have a hobby? I sincerely, truly hope that everyone on the call has some kind of hobby. And if you don't, I very respectfully suggest that maybe go find one. I'm a musician. I play the saxophone and I know how to play the piano. When I started learning how to play the piano in first grade, I did not start off by playing Beethoven and Bach, right? Musicians start with repeating scales and playing songs like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star ad nauseum. Because the repetition of where to put your fingers on the keyboard trains your brain that that small action is a part of the overall mandatory routine. The action becomes automatic, a habit is formed, and then you can build on it and grow and improve. So you start off with Twinkle Twinkle, and then you go to the next level and the next level, and eventually you work your way up to Beethoven and Bach, right? Same with accessibility. You can't start at the top of the pile. Introduce and practice one aspect of accessibility at a time. Break it down. People tend to view accessibility as this insurmountable mountain. And they're like, oh my gosh, I have to do all of these things to all of the content I ever created in the history of ever. Like, no, those words never came out of my mouth, but somehow that's what people tend to hear. So bring it back, break it down, focus on one aspect at a time. Because learning the concepts of accessibility is a whole lot easier to understand than trying to figure the whole thing out, all of it, all at once, right? We're going back to our bathroom remodel. You can't do everything all at once. You do the cabinets. Well, you probably do the flooring first, and then you do the cabinets and the toilet. You do one piece at a time. You also want to provide a variety of training. I apologize if my internet was the one that dropped out there. We're just going to pick it up from somewhere in the middle. So we want to provide a variety of formats for resources and training for people. Because typically people won't go out of their way to learn something new. And we all learn in different ways. We all learn with different means. You can reference and use materials from other outside reputable sources. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every time, right? So organizations like IAAP have lots of webinars. There's LinkedIn Learning, there's DeQ, there's WebAIM, just to name a few. So curate and find outside resources and build on those and provide a curated list to your audience. And then you can take all of those resources and put them in an online hub, put them in one spot so people know where to go when they're looking for these things, when they're looking to try to figure out how to incorporate accessibility. And then the last principle, number 4, make it satisfying. Now, the first 3 principles, make it obvious, attractive, and easy. Those help ensure that the behavior will be performed. This last law, make it satisfying, helps ensure that the behavior will be repeated. Pleasure teaches your brain that a behavior is worth remembering and repeating. Our brains are hardwired to prioritize immediate rewards over delayed rewards. Here's a fun little trivia piece for you. Chewing gum was sold commercially throughout the 1800s, and it was made of bland resins. In 1891, a tiny little company you may have heard of called Wrigley's came on the scene, and they completely changed the game. Does anyone want to guess how, or does anyone know how Wrigley's changed the game? I'll tell you. Wrigley's added flavor to the resin, right? They threw in like spearmint and juicy fruit, wintergreen. After they did this, consumption skyrocketed, sales skyrocketed, and Wrigley's, to this day, is the #1 chewing gum company in the world. Now, I will concede putting a few drops of flavor in their batches of resin is probably not the only factor that made Wrigley's the largest chewing gum company in the world. There was more going on behind the scenes. But the point of the story is that the flavoring that was added was the reward and the hook that triggered our brains, telling us, oh, that was a really enjoyable experience. Yeah, I'm going to do that again, right? So, again, how do we make accessibility satisfying? This goes kind of back to the making it attractive. It ties into making it attractive. Be very intentional with your wording and your attitude. I previously had conversations with two different directors of disability resources, and they basically told me the same thing. One said that her philosophy for the office is, what does this student need to succeed, and how can I make things easier for them? The other director said they have a rule in their office that they always smile when a student comes in. Doesn't matter what kind of day the staff is having, you have to put that all behind you and positively and genuinely engage with the students. Because, and I quote, the world is hard enough. We do what we can to make things better for our students. Both directors also told me that students come into their offices to talk with them about other classes and issues that are completely unrelated because the students felt comfortable with the staff. Staff members from both offices are rewarding students by providing them with a pleasant experience. It's making them come back and want more. So be intentional, be positive with your wording and your attitude, right? As human beings, we tend to be drawn to others who are very passionate about what they're doing. So use that passion to bring others into the accessibility circle with you. We feel good when we can connect with others and we share our knowledge. We all have stories of success. We all have stories of mistakes. There's probably a couple of really epic failures that are along the way as well. So sharing the good, the bad, and the ugly can help others learn and it can help us learn from other people. Oftentimes, we learn that we are not alone in our struggles and we can help share ideas and anecdotes and maybe some possible solutions to things. I have been at conferences where very small community colleges and very large universities are facing the exact same situations. We can also add a little gamification or incentive aspect to accessibility, right? You can make friendly department competitions, find an accountability partner that you can learn accessibility with together, collaborate with local establishments, offer gift cards as prizes, giveaways, raffles, order some swag just for fun, notepads and pens, right? Everybody loves a little bit of swag. And then celebrate the small wins. Recognizing the effort that people put forth makes them feel good about that effort. It boosts our dopamine and it makes us want to continue to do more. It's kind of that hit that the flavoring in the chewing gum had originally given to us, right? So putting it all together, making it satisfying, be very intentional and positive, connect with others, and then celebrate the small wins. Now, wrapping it all together and maintaining the system. I mentioned in the very beginning about the system that we need to lay out in order to get to our goals. Success is not a goal to reach or a finish line to cross. It is a system to improve, an endless process to refine. And if that does not define digital accessibility, I'm kind of at a loss. So, shifting the approach, when we make any major change in our life, we can't just change one thing. We can't just do it once and call it a day. We have to shift our overall approach, right? It doesn't happen by accident. So if you eat one apple after a lifetime of eating candy bars, you can't go, "Oh, yay, look at me, I'm super healthy." Like you're 1% healthier than if you had eaten another candy bar. But in order to maintain that lifestyle, you have to repeat that action, right? You have to maintain those healthy eating habits for a period of time in order to see a difference. Continuing to make the small 1% improvements helps maintain the system that will move accessibility initiative forward. So how do we do this? Prioritize and invest in accessibility. Now, I know what you're all thinking. I know what you're going to say. I can hear the eyeballs rolling, right? Like, oh, if only. We don't have the budget. I don't have time. I'm already short-staffed. I'm so busy. We don't have the personnel. I hear it all, truly. In 2017, my institution was one of many who were hit with a complaint from the Office of Civil Rights. We are a state-funded, public, liberal arts institution. We are not sitting on piles of cash. We had to find the resources at that point to comply with OCR and correct the issues. We basically had no choice. So the leaders within your respective organizations can choose to prioritize accessibility now when we have a little bit of time to plan for it, or chances are fairly high that they will be forced to prioritize when accessibility becomes a necessity. And if you wait until it's a necessity, you've waited too long. If you approach accessibility as if you know you're going to get hit with a complaint or a lawsuit, then you'll be in a much better position to handle it. And I don't say that in a fear-mongering kind of way. It's pragmatic, it's logical. It's the same type of concept as to why we have car insurance, right? Nobody wants to be in a horrific car accident. I mean, if we're being truly honest, nobody really wants to be in a fender bender, right? But we plan for those things by having car insurance so we can provide for our families if something terrible were to happen. So by implementing accessibility and making sure that accessibility is being prioritized, it's just a little bit of an insurance policy to try to make sure that stakeholders, constituents, and users are being provided for if something happens to the organization, if you get hit with a complaint. Now, we can all determine what we control, right? We can all choose what we spend time and energy on. I have absolutely no control over Oswego's budget. I have no control over their hiring process. I'm kind of bottom of the totem pole in my organization. So really the only thing that I can control is pretty much me. But we can use our choices and our actions to help influence the people around you. So if I find a piece of software that I think is going to be really beneficial, I can propose that to my supervisor, or I could propose that to the chief technology officer. And I can use my knowledge and my expertise to influence those around me as to why it would be a good idea to invest in that piece of software. And then look for the nooks and crannies where we can pull 1%. I think this is a little more applicable to maybe some of the people who are in higher decision-making positions, but it also, I think it truly does apply to everyone. There's always going to be little nooks and crannies. And even if you can't hire an entire accessibility team, chances are there's spots where you could pull just a little bit of resources and sort of gather them together to prioritize accessibility in that moment. All of us can question the notion that we've always done it that way, right? How many people hear that? Oh, we've just always done it that way. That phrase drives me nuts. And I find myself saying it in my own life, not just in like a personal, a professional capacity, but I hear myself saying that in my own life and I stop in my tracks. So question the notion of why we've always done it that way. And again, as accessibility champions and advocates, we have a little more knowledge than other people might have. So we can make suggestions for small improvements. And then for those who are in higher direct decision-making positions, take the opportunity to really critically look at how accessibility resources, or I'm sorry, at how resources are being used. Work to restructure, reallocate, reprioritize, look for outside monies like grants, donations, fundraisers. Really critically look at how your organization is using things and try to determine if it's the best use of those resources. And I feel the most important question any organization can ask itself is, what is the cost of not changing? There's always going to be a cost involved when we make changes, right? And that's usually the argument that like administration or leaders tend to use. But there's always a cost if we don't make any changes. Bring that to the forefront. Start asking those questions. Remind people that it's a little bit of an insurance policy and see where you can get. See if that can help push the needle forward just a little bit. I do believe this slide deck will be shared with everyone. And in it, on the last slide here, I have a list of resources in the speaker notes. Oswego's accessibility website is oswego.edu/accessibility. My email is kathleen.deforest@oswego.edu. In the slide deck, I've also provided links to a PDF checklist that Oswego created, a very simple way to help remind people some of the basic foundational skills that you can implement for accessibility. We also have a lot of written and video tutorials that are open for use. Again, I mentioned some of the outside resources like IAAP, DeQ University. There's a company called CHAC's Accessibility Training that I highly recommend. There's also LinkedIn Learning. All of those resources are on this last slide of the slide deck when it is shared with you. What questions can I answer? Or what comments does anyone have? I have not been checking chat, so I'm going to briefly skim through that, although I do see that there has been a lot going on in there, and I appreciate that.
Hey, this is Rachel. Yeah, no questions in the Q&A or the chat, but yes, lots of great comments and some things and personal experiences shared. Trying to go back, someone said their department exists because of a lawsuit back in 2017.
My position, well, the previous position I held existed because of the lawsuit or the complaint that Oswego had. So yes, I get that. Not really the way that I would recommend going through that, but a little bit beneficial to me all the same.
I
Rachel,
think
do
it's
you
a,
mind if I stop sharing my screen?
oh, go ahead. Sure. I was just kind of looking to some other comments. I think people, there was a lot of agreement about, celebrating the small wins. And a lot of people shared some different things that they have done. So I think that's an important piece of this is, that around your whole topic about biting off small pieces at a time and celebrating those small wins. It's really
I think
important.
it's an aspect, or it's like I don't know, it's a mindset that just kind of gets overlooked so often, and not just for accessibility, but kind of in lots of different things. Like how many times in our own personal life do we go, "Oh my gosh, I have all these things I need to do," and we start making this huge list for ourselves. Whereas in reality, it's much more productive if we go, okay, I'm going to ignore most of these things for now, but I'm going to focus on these 5 things that I have to do, right? The most immediate things.
We do have a question that came in the Q&A. Oh, a couple are popping in now, and I love that the attendees are sharing resources and things in the chat. So what we do, I will answer the question. We will share your slides, and then I can also pull some of the links and resources that people are sharing in the chat, and we can include that in the follow-up email
Oh,
as
that would be
well. So
great.
we'll make
Yeah.
sure we save the chat. So I'm going to read the questions that are coming in. So the first one says, I love that concept of get to, and we'll borrow that from you. My question
Yes.
is whether you were able to institute policy procedure to enforce accessibility on content development.
To enforce accessibility on content development. Um, this is a great question. Like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, right? It's that same kind of concept. Unfortunately, within our institution, we have not quite figured out a way to make accessibility mandatory. Absolutely 1,000,000% mandatory. We provide a lot of resources. We offer a lot of trainings. We've had 2 higher up individuals who have gone on what we've called a campus tour, and they've gone around to different departments to share Title II information and accessibility. Like, this is why it's important. This is why we need to do this, people. So I don't know that there's really a solid, good answer as to how we can make things absolutely.
Looks like we lost Kate again. We'll just see. We'll give her a second to pop back on here.
Okay, again, apologies if that was me.
I
Um,
think it might be Kate because you were freezing too. Maybe if you want to shut your video off, maybe that
yeah,
would help your
I
bandwidth while we finish up with questions here.
can do that. I apologize. I'm
That's okay.
sitting right next to my router. I'm trying to get as much as I can in my favor. All right, brief answer to how we can enforce accessibility. I think the best way to do it is to just keep pounding on the 1% and keep encouraging, be positive. And every once in a while, you do need to kind of throw that stick in and be like, well, if we don't do this, there's a high probability that we could get sued, or, however you want to phrase it. Um, but I think just continuing to push that message is really the best way to do it. And again, we tend to be drawn to people who are passionate about what they do, and we tend to eventually mimic those people if we hang around them long enough. So if people hear the message continually and they hear it in a positive manner, I think eventually they might kind of kick in and be like, "Oh, well that sounds kind of interesting," or "Oh, I remember this being said. Maybe I should figure it out."
Thanks, Kate. There's a comment like this, just a question on here. It says, have you eaten the elephant or have you been able to only eat the tail?
We have only been able to eat the tail, I'll be honest. Yeah, as I said, we don't really have a great mandatory policy. There's not really a great way to force people to do things, at least not that we've been able to implement. But so within the State University of New York system, there are 64 schools. And of those 64 schools, Oswego is probably in the top 3 as accessibility leaders. We have been working on this since 2016 or so. And then when we got hit with the complaint, that really springboarded things for us. And our administration, thankfully, has been very supportive and very positive and proactive. So we have been working very hard to continue to make things better, to learn how to make things better, to share with others within our organizations as well as outside of our organization. So, yeah, we just continue pushing on, and we'll get there a little bit at a time.
Absolutely. All right, we had then one more question come in. It says, as institutions, we proclaim our desire to create spaces that are inclusive and accessible. We hire people who claim they are inclusive in their teaching learning. And I'm curious of your thoughts on enforcing a terms of service in that you were hired to work here and we must create accessible content for our learners. Or is this maybe this is a hope more than a reality?
That's a great question. And I do think that including accessibility in the hiring process is very important. I'm just rereading the question, trying to make sure that I'm focused in on it. Hired to work here and that we must create accessible content for our learners. Yeah, I think that having that, mantra is imperative. And it's not necessarily something that all organizations are embracing, but I have seen job descriptions and such that do include accessibility a little more often than I had in the past. So I think having that knowledge is very important, and tying it into the hiring process um, it is very important. It might not end up being the make or break point, right? If you have a candidate that's super duper qualified for whatever position, but they're really new in the accessibility space. But as long as people are willing to learn and willing to embrace that and grow with the organization, yeah, I definitely think that that's a very positive thing.
Okay, great. That seems to be the end of our questions, but we do still have a few more minutes if anybody has any other last minute questions for Kate. And again, thank you for our audience in this community for all the sharing that's been going on in the chat. I'm not sure if you've seen all this great resources being shared, Kate, but um, again, we'll copy this, we'll pull these from the chat and make sure. So if you weren't able, if you missed them,
Yeah, no,
we'll make sure. And that if anybody, um, yes, and we usually do get a transcript as well. So if somebody's asking, this is a more of an IAP question about getting a certificate for this class. If you're using, want to use this webinar for continuing education credits for your certification, you can just, upload this from your account under your webinars. If you're not, you need it for something else, you can email us afterwards, and I can drop the email in the chat, and we can actually create a certificate of attendance for this as well. Let's see, I just think we had one question slip in here. It says, who owns accessibility, IT or maybe other departments?
Oh gosh, that's a great question as well. And in the 6 or 7 years that I've worked at Oswego, I've bounced back and forth between IT and communications and marketing probably at least 3 times, very honestly. Um, I don't know that there's a specific answer to that either, because it kind of encapsulates both worlds, all worlds. So there's the inclusivity office, inclusivity, equity, and diversity. There's IT, there's marketing and communications. Currently, my department or my team that works with accessibility, well, that's not even true. Currently, we have accessibility champions who are in all sorts of different departments. We don't really have one centralized department for accessibility. I think it kind of depends on your institution or your organization. And I definitely think that it needs to cross multiple departments. I don't know that it's specifically owned by one entity, but it needs to kind of flow back and forth between lots of different departments and units within organizations, because there is so much to cover, and it's multi-pronged.
Yes,
That is a great question though.
there was a comment in the chat that said we all own it. So I think that's a
Yes,
great answer.
that is a great answer. I'm going to use that answer from now on.
Well, we did have a couple more questions, so I'm just going to keep going while time permits here. So it says, how would you go about explaining to leadership about going all the way and making the company accessible instead of just good enough for compliance?
Yeah, that might involve the using the stick as an incentive, meaning, if we're good enough, fine, that's good enough, but um, are we still able to be sued, or can there still be a complaint filed against us if we are only good enough? And what's it going to cost? I think that might be the best reasoning for higher level leaders. What's it going to cost? We can invest in, software and whatever, and it's going to cost us this much. But if we have an actual lawsuit filed against us, what's the cost of that going to be? Um, yeah, and accessibility isn't just about compliance, it's finishing the job. So absolutely. Accessibility is ever evolving. So you will never be 100% accessible. But I truly believe that it's worthwhile to continue to be, 1%, 5%, 10%, whatever. Those are all very subjective numbers, but just continuing to improve in general. It's not a one and done. You can't just set it and forget it. Okay, we did that website. We're good now. Like accessibility's done. Yay. You have to continue evolving. And I think, again, just the question of cost is going to be potentially what gets leaders' attention.
And I think that there's a saying in the community about progress over perfection.
Yes,
Well,
yes,
we're
it's
moving,
all about the progress.
and it's a journey. I just see somebody chatted that as well. So let's see, there's a question about, have you noticed any changes with the current administration?
Um, I would respectfully like to not touch that one. I don't have the expertise to really go into details about how the current administration is affecting everything. And I think the best that we can do is just keep doing what's best for the stakeholders and the constituents. And if that means going against what the current administration or any administration is laying down and, continuing to make things accessible, then that would be my recommendation. I think it's all about the users, stakeholders, and constituents.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a really great answer to that question. Well, that looks like we closed out the Q&A, so we still have a few minutes, but in the meantime, I'll just mention some upcoming, webinars that we have on the 13th of November is part of our professional education series for digital accessibility. We're going to have source code remediation, beyond accessibility testing, and static analysis. Same time at 11 a.m. Eastern. And then on December 9th, we have another part of the subject matter expert webinar that we had today, accessible firebrand. Why can't I use my brand color there? And if not there, then where? Sounds like a Dr. Seuss tongue twister there. And then on December 11th, we'll close out our digital professional education series with how to make sure your partners provide accessible content and components. And again, if you're an IAAP member, you have free access to these webinars, part of the professional education series. And today's webinar and the 9th, coming up on December 9th, was part of our subject matter expert series that are free to members and non-members as well. And if you're not a member, we're almost hitting that 10,000 milestone mark that we're going to be really excited to hit that by the end of the year. So if you're interested in signing up and getting free access to webinars and content and network platform and free courses, please, check us out on the website. And I know, I think somebody asked for an email address before. Oh, about the certificate. So I'm just going to drop that in. It's a really long email address. So let me see. So it's info@accessibilityassociation.org. Just put in the subject line that you wanted a certificate of attendance for today's webinar, and we can get one created for you. I wanted to thank you, Kate, so much for this great, very interactive. That would be one of the most interactive audiences I've had. So it seems that people enjoyed the topic. And thanks to Beth and Lizzie for providing our interpretation today, and Jody for our captions. And we hope we'll see you on a future webinar with IAAP.
Thank you all very much.